I'm Nima Rajan. Federal Election Day is around the corner, and the National Party leaders are keeping busy with campaign events aimed at securing votes on September 20th. Fresh off a rally in Brampton, Ontario, last night, where he was introduced by former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau began the day in Halifax. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole spent his day in Quebec, starting in Jonquière, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh started his day in Essex, Ontario. Elections Canada says there has been a sizable jump in the number of Canadians who have voted in advance polls. An estimated 5.8 million voters showed up to cast their ballots early between last Friday and Monday's close, which is an 18.5% increase over the 2019 election. A 56-year-old woman has been charged with assaulting Liberal MP Mark Sarray at his campaign office in Sudbury. Police say the woman pinned Mr. Sarray against the wall by pushing a table against him. She then hit his hand with her cell phone when he began recording the confrontation on his phone. They say the woman, who claimed she had been injured by one of Mr. Sarray's campaign signs, left the office, but she allegedly confronted him again when he left the building, yelling and striking the hood of his vehicle. Police say the woman is set to appear in court in November on a charge of assault with a weapon. Inflation skyrocketed in August, soaring to an 18-year high of 4.1%. That is the largest year-over-year inflation increase since March 2003. Higher gasoline and housing prices fueled much of the increase, with gas prices jumping 32.5% year-over-year. Excluding gas prices, Statistics Canada says the annual inflation rate would have been 3.2% last month, compared with a gain of 3.7% in July. A forestry company in BC is applying for a one-year extension of an injunction against ongoing protests. They are over the logging of old-growth trees on Vancouver Island. A lawyer for Teal Cedar Products warned anarchy will result if the extension is not granted until September of next year. Since May, almost 1,000 people have been arrested in the Fairy Creek area north of Port Renfrew. Calgary-based Providence Therapeutics says it has signed 2 contracts to have its developmental mRNA vaccine for COVID-19 manufactured in Canada. Providence this week reported that a Phase 1 trial involving 60 adults between 18 and 64 showed its mRNA vaccine is producing immunity levels comparable to those produced by Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna shots. British Columbia's Auditor General says the provincial government has not effectively overseen the safety of 1,900 dams it regulates. The report says that while the owners of the dams are responsible for their safety, the ministry has a mandate to see that they comply with provincial regulations. It also says the ministry had gaps in its records. This resulted in it being unaware of some dams that it should have been regulating. A former Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health says rising COVID-19 hospitalizations are leading to what he calls an acute care system breakdown in the province. Dr. James Talbot says the worsening 4th wave of the pandemic could force doctors to triage patients, deciding who gets to live or die. Yesterday, the province reported that a record-setting 212 Albertans are in intensive care. A top doctor in the Northwest Territories has closed all schools in Yellowknife and surrounding areas after a spike in COVID-19 cases. Schools closed today, 2 weeks after students returned to classrooms and are to stay closed until at least September 24th. Dr. Cami Candola says students will shift to online learning. Dr. Candola says she chose to close schools to protect children under 12 who cannot receive a vaccine. The Ontario COVID-19 Science Advisory Table is calling for more research on the condition called long COVID and its potential burden on the healthcare system. The panel's brief says a conservative estimate suggests between 57,000 and 78,000 Ontarians had or are currently experiencing long COVID symptoms. The most common of the more than 200 symptoms include fatigue, shortness of breath, general pain or discomfort, anxiety, and depression. The head of Quebec's COVID-19 vaccination program, Daniel Père, will take over the province's deployment of rapid COVID-19 tests in elementary schools. Health Minister Christian Dubé says it's too early to judge the success of the rapid test rollout, which has been criticized by school administrators and opposition parties. Nova Scotia is pausing its plans to ease pandemic restrictions. The province was scheduled to move into Phase 5 today, but it is delaying its full reopening until at least October 4th. This is due to rising cases of COVID-19 and fewer vaccinations than hoped for. All right, stay with us. When we come back, we'll take a look at the ongoing federal election campaign with Mr. Thomas Caldwell of Caldwell Securities Limited. That and more news from around the world. So stay with us. We'll be right back. With Election Day in sight, the Liberals and Conservatives are focusing their pitches to voters. A poll conducted by Leger in collaboration with the Canadian Press suggests the two parties are effectively tied, with the NDP in third place. During a stop in Richmond, BC yesterday, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau argued that Conservative leader Erin O'Toole's plan would be detrimental for the country and the issues progressive voters care about. Mr. O'Toole was in Eastern Ontario yesterday, arguing that a vote for anyone but a Conservative candidate is a vote for the status quo. And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh used his first campaign stop yesterday to accuse the Liberals of siding with telecom companies and not doing enough to lower cell phone bills. Well, with only 5 more days until the big day, is Canada ready for a new government? Joining us now is Mr. Thomas Caldwell, Chairman and CEO of Caldwell Securities Limited. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima.
So what are your thoughts about Canada's direction moving forward relative to which party wins?
Well, first off, let me say this election is boring, if not vapid or facile. It's like a student council election. There are no issues at hand. Everybody's dealing in gotchas, trying to slag the other party, or little giveaways with our money, which really should have been matters dealt with in Parliament. These are not parliamentary election issues. They're for in-house sort of things. I haven't heard anything about economic growth, how we're going to build this economy, how we're going to create jobs, how we're going to generate the revenues and never mind taxes, the kind of thing. If you want the economy to grow, you should be cutting taxes, not going the other way. And I'm not speaking from an old establishment-y financial services guy. So my point here is we're not dealing with the issues that Canadians care about. They're dealing with issues that special interest groups care about, hoping to grab a couple of votes. But that doesn't attract interest at all. So people are going to vote. And I guess if I were to look at the world, we've seen Mr. Trudeau in action or lack thereof over the last several years. He is, I think the old one, he's not quite ready. I think that was from an election or two ago. He's still not ready. And the world stage, he's considered a lightweight, and we can't afford that. We're in a world requiring a lot more aggressive, meaningful wisdom negotiations, for example, the China situation and the two Michaels. So I think people, or actually markets, I can't speak for Canadians, but a lot of markets would prefer to see a Conservative victory of some kind. But clearly it's going neck and neck. And of course, Maxime Bernier's party, the People's Party of Canada, they're showing some good percentages. So people are looking for a Conservative alternative, and at least he does discuss policies. I would like to have seen him in the debate, but the danger here is it will pull votes away from the Conservatives. And so we have really a hodgepodge shaping up here with either the NDPs and Liberals all over again, or worse still, the Bloc Québécois, who have no interest in Canada whatsoever, sort of aligning. So it'll be quite interesting to see. Clearly, I think a Conservative win might be a bit more helpful in terms of how people look at Canada.
All right, sir. Well, as you mentioned earlier, and we've seen this a lot on the campaign trail, campaigns sometimes focus on negatives as candidates seek to diminish their opponents. I guess the big question here is, does this work, Mr. Caldwell?
I don't think so. I mean, we all know the negatives. In fact, if anything, we have a world of negatives. I mean, everybody's dealing in it. You pick up the newspaper, everybody's got a complaint, upset, some kind of scandal. I think a lot of us, I know I am, just tired of hearing that stuff. It doesn't work. But, to quote Kim Campbell, who was Canadian Prime Minister for, I think, an hour and a half, she had a great line. She said, campaigns are no time to discuss serious issues. But I think Canadians, or at least this Canadian, would like to see something meaningful discussed, something in terms of policy, where we want to go, where do I want to lead the country, what's my vision for the country, and never ask of how we can divide the country. We got to make the rich pay and do this people pay. I mean, how are we going to build it together? Leaders should bring unity. That's how you judge a leader, to bring people together and not ask, I mean, I paraphrase in Canada here, not ask what the government can do for you. Why don't you ask what you can do to the country? Why not challenge Canadians? Because we're up for that.
All right, sir, just about 45 seconds left here. But what do you think about the world geopolitical situation relative to Canada, especially as you mentioned, the US, China, and even Afghanistan?
Well, we need greater heft in the world stage. Unfortunately, our present prime minister goes to G7 meetings and just tries to seek photo opportunities because nobody's interested in chatting with him. But America is no longer our close friend, our special friend. China, the whole game is changing. They seem to be shifting to our Maoist isolationism, if you will. Afghanistan, that's over and done. That was catastrophic on many, many levels, but there's enough commentary on that. But I do think we need greater heft and greater say on the world stage, as we would have had with Trudeau Sr. or Brian Mulroney or even Jean Chrétien, leaders who were listened to. We need more of that to get some wins here.
Addressing climate change has become a top priority during the election campaign as wildfires, extreme heat, and drought have already hit many Canadian communities. With countries worldwide looking to reduce their impact and shifting to renewable energy sources, what will Canada do? Climate change has been a major discussion during this election, and political parties have all made various promises to address the issue. But what are some realistic steps that the next federal government can take to address climate change? And how can individual Canadians make a difference in this effort? Well, joining us now to help address some of these questions is Mr. Gideon Foreman, Climate Change and Transportation Policy Analyst at the David Suzuki Foundation. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks so much.
Now, we hear a lot about climate change, especially on the campaign trail. But what does climate change look like in Canada today compared to maybe 50 or 100 years ago?
I think a lot of what we've been seeing this past summer, these droughts, these forest fires, the heat. I mean, I think about the heat in that poor community of Lytton, British Columbia, in the BC interior, reaching temperatures of 49 degrees Celsius. So you think about it, that's halfway to boiling on the Celsius scale. I mean, that's what climate change is looking like. And so when the scientists say climate change is real, it's happening now, that's what it looks like.
All right, sir. Well, jumping to some of the issues on the campaign trail, we know affordability is a big one. So what are some realistic or reasonable steps to address rising food and energy costs in an environmentally sustainable way?
I mean, I think the good thing about the transition we need to make to move to a greener economy is that a lot of the things that we're going to have in our daily lives in that economy are actually going to be less expensive. So as we move, for example, to wind and solar power, the cost of electricity is going to come down. One of the big energy stories of the last few years is just how much electricity costs for wind and solar have dropped just dramatically in the last few years. As we move to more electric cars and electric buses, municipalities and individuals are going to save money because it's actually just cheaper to run electric vehicles. Electric cars, as you know, there's just not much to go wrong with them, so maintenance costs are very low. And same thing with electric buses. They're just very inexpensive to run. So the good news is that a lot of the things we need in this new green economy, they're the right thing to do. They're good for the climate, but they're also good for the pocketbook.
All right, sir. Well, we know a major aspect of the climate change discussion in Canada is the country's oil reserves. So what would a complete shift from Canada's dependence on fossil fuels to green energy look like?
Well, first of all, it would be a place where we're doing something for the workers in the oil and gas sector. You know, as we make that transition away from oil and gas, as the scientists say we have to, we absolutely 100% have to protect the folks who are working in the oil and gas sector and make sure that they get other jobs in the new economy. The good news is that there are lots of jobs in that new economy. We can put lots of people to work building electric buses and electric cars and putting up solar and wind power, producing fruits and vegetables and other foods that we need locally. So the good news is as we transition to that green economy, it's going to be an economy in which we create a lot of jobs as well.
All right, sir, just about 2 minutes left here, but jumping to transportation, Canada is a large country with a spread out population. So what are some ways we can better link our northern and rural people with the rest of the country while reducing emissions?
Well, one of the things that we've talked about is a national bus system. You know, this year with Greyhound pulling out of Canada, a lot of northern and remote communities are really isolated and they're not connected anymore. What we think the federal and provincial governments and territorial governments should do is have a national bus system, ideally with electric buses, so that people in these rural and northern communities would be able to get around by bus. That's a first step, we think.
All right, sir. And what are your concerns or your organization's concerns when it comes to Canada-specific issues in terms of climate change?
Well, we absolutely have to get our emissions down. I mean, we have to transition away from the fossil fuel sector. And that's not just us saying that. That's what the world scientists and economists are saying. We have to move away from that. That means a very significant reduction in emissions from oil and gas, probably on the order of 60%. But the good news is in this transition, we can also create a lot of jobs. And Canada is really well positioned for this transition. We have a huge amount of solar and wind power, for example. I mean, on the southern prairies in Alberta and Saskatchewan, we have world-class wind and solar. So as we make that transition, I think we're going to find a lot of benefits, a lot of co-benefits. Also, people's health will improve. As we're not burning fossil fuels, air quality is going to improve. And so we're going to see people healthier as well.
All right, Mr. Gideon Foreman from the David Suzuki Foundation. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Stay tuned, everyone. When we come back from the break, we'll take a look at stories that are happening around the world. The United Kingdom posts its biggest jump in annual inflation last month. Both North and South Korea conduct missile tests, and problems continue to affect El Salvador's Bitcoin rollout. We'll have these stories and more when we come back, so stay with us. We'll be back after a short break. The UK posted the biggest jump in annual inflation on record last month. The Office for National Statistics says consumer price inflation accelerated to 3.2% in the 12 months through August. This is from 2% the previous month. Economists had forecast an inflation rate of 2.9%. The unexpected jump in prices may mean that inflation will peak at a higher level and will remain elevated for a longer period than previously expected. This is according to economists at Berenberg Bank. That would increase pressure on the Bank of England to boost interest rates as it targets 2% inflation. Both North and South Korea have test-launched ballistic missiles hours apart from each other. South Korea's presidential office said it conducted its first underwater-launched ballistic missile test on Wednesday afternoon. The statement said the weapon is expected to help South Korea deter potential external threats. The test followed two short-range North Korean ballistic missile launches. On Monday, North Korea said it fired a newly developed cruise missile in its first weapons test in 6 months. The chief of the UN Refugee Agency says the international community and the Taliban will need to find a way to deal with each other. Filippo Grandi said on Tuesday that the world faces a difficult choice. It must deliver urgently needed aid to millions of Afghans while navigating the political minefield of supporting a Taliban-run government. The UN has warned that by the end of the year, 97% of Afghans will be living below the poverty level. Well, 1 week after El Salvador became the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender, problems continue to affect the rollout. El Salvador rolled out a digital wallet known as the Chivo on September 8th, but the system has often been down for maintenance. It may have been overloaded by the number of Salvadorans looking to take advantage of the $30 bonus that the government put in each account to incentivize the adoption. China is imposing lockdowns and ordering mass testing in cities along its east coast amid the latest surge in COVID-19 cases. Checks have been set up in toll stations around the city of Putian and inside Fujian province. The nearby cities of Xiamen and Chenzhou have also restricted travel. The National Health Commission on Wednesday said an additional 50 cases had been diagnosed, most of them in the Putian region. The Dutch government says social distancing will end in the Netherlands on September 25th. That is the same date the Dutch government will begin mandating COVID-19 passes to get into venues like bars, restaurants, and theaters. The changes end social distancing measures that have been in place for the past 18 months. But it goes hand in hand with the use of passes showing that people have been fully vaccinated, have just tested negative, or have recently recovered from COVID-19. The economic ravages of COVID-19 are forcing some families in Zimbabwe to abandon the age-old tradition of taking care of their older people. While some roam the streets, others have been placed in facilities for older people. They were once widely viewed by many Zimbabweans as un-African and against the social bonds that have extended families together for generations. A report by HelpAge International says COVID-19 has increased the risk of abuse and neglect of older people across Africa and around the world. Poland's most powerful politician says the country's future is in the European Union, but that Poland also wishes to remain a sovereign country. Jarosław Kaczynski, the head of the governing Law and Justice Party, made his comments in an interview published Wednesday. The interview follows negative comments about the EU from top party members last week. Opposition politicians accused the country's leadership of seeking to take the country out of the EU. Polling indicates a high level of support for EU membership exists in Poland. 9 Hong Kong activists and ex-lawmakers have been handed jail sentences of up to 10 months. They are part of a group of 12 defendants who pleaded guilty earlier this month to participating in the Tiananmen Square candlelight vigil. Such activities were banned last year. Police cited public health risks from the pandemic. Critics say the ban is part of a crackdown on opposition after anti-government protests in 2019. A big vote in California has reaffirmed the status quo. California Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom has defeated an attempt to oust him from office led by Republicans. The outcome was monitored nationally as the 2022 midterm elections are on the horizon when control of Congress will be at stake. Egypt has opened an ancient tomb structure belonging to the cemetery complex of King Djoser, a pharaoh who lived more than 4,500 years ago. The opening of the southern tomb follows extensive restorations. The pharaoh was not actually buried there, but in the nearby famed Step Pyramid complex near Cairo. That is one of the country's richest archaeological sites. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and this was Forum Daily. We'll see you next time. Take care, Canada.